Hey guys, this is Fik. In the last episode we've set up the Vue project and we started working on the Autocomplete component. We have the basic design for the input and the popover and the list. Okay, so let's keep going. I want to have the ability to have a list item selected so I can give it a nice background color and I know which one was the selected value. So let's add a selected one in here. And this is going to be an index. So let's set this one to 0 initially. And I'll say that I want to add a class here in the condition that the class name is going to be selected. And the condition I'll have here is whether this item is selected. So selected equals the current index. Let's make sure we wrap everything to be a real object. Okay, now it should work, but you won't be able to see anything because the selected class is not yet designed. But as you can see here, the first item, because the default is 0, so the first item is selected. Now we can add styling for the selected list item. I'll give this one a background of, I don't know, let's just gamble in here. Let's do something greenish, and I think this one looks good. Okay, and I want to make sure I'm looking at the options, unordered list, list item, and now it looks like it's selected. I'll give it a color of white text, and I'll have the font weight a little bit bigger, so I don't know, what about 600? 600 looks good enough for me. Let's grab the CSS and paste it right here. Okay, the next step will be to actually select a value. And I already set up a method here for this, but all it does is just console logging the item value. The first step will be to do this dot selected is equal to the current index. So in this case, the selected is reset to 0, but if I'm going to click the third item, I want the third item to be selected. So the selected will be 2 in this case. Next, I'll create a function called this dot select item that we'll create in a moment, and delete this console.log statement. Okay, the select item, what it's going to do is I'm not going to pass any arguments because I already know this selected index. So all I need to do here is say this dot selected item is going to be equal to this dot matches at this dot selected. So we're going to the matches filtered array, and we grab the item at index, which is the one we just clicked on. And next we need to reset the visibility. So visible in this case is false again. Okay, and I want to make sure that I have this selected item key in our data. So it's going to be started as null. And I want to make sure that I can show the user the selected item. Okay, so I'll do this one on the input itself. I'll say v text is equal, and I need to check if I have selected item. So if I have selected item, in this case, I'll take this selected item at the filter by location. So the selected item should be an object. So let's say a customer object. I don't want to print out an object. I want to print an object at a certain key. And the key is usually the key that the user selected to filter by. Okay, and otherwise I want to show an empty string. Okay, let's try this one out and click on the div here and start typing and Mary Daniels, and voila, it shows up and it's actually looking great. I thought I'll need to modify the CSS a little bit, but I think I'm satisfied with the result here. Okay, next I think we need to have some sort of a placeholder, right? So initially, once we load the component, we want to see something here. But this is not a regular input, so we can't do like placeholder on the div and to have it equal to something, because this one is not going to work. What I'll do is under this div, I'll create another one with the ID of placeholder, and I'll just print the text and make it designed so it looks like a placeholder. So if I have a selected item, I don't want to show the placeholder. So if selected item is equal to null. Only in this case I want to render this div, and the value for this one is going to be let's say the user can pass a title, and this title will be the placeholder, and if we have title we'll show this one, otherwise we'll just say something like select 1. Okay, something like that. Is it looking good? Yes, we just need to design the placeholder. So we'll grab this div right here and we'll add a style to it. And I think I have a typo. This one should be placeholder. I forgot the L. Let's refresh again and grab this item and add a style to it. And let's see. Okay, we need position absolute. The top will be something like, I don't know, 10 pixels. And I want to go to the left also 10 pixels. Let's give it a font size. It must have the same font size we have on the input. So in our case, it was 25 pixels. So we'll have the same here. So font size is 25 pixels. We'll give this one a color of very light gray, so it actually looks like a placeholder. So light, never mind, let's just select the color from here. I think this one looks like a placeholder. Yeah, good enough. And I want the pointer events to be none. And if you're not familiar with the CSS property, it says when I hover over this one, as you can see, I can actually click on it and select the text, but I don't want to be able to do something with the mouse over this placeholder, so I can just set pointer events to none. And now it just says nothing, and I can click on it and it will go actually through this div and click on the bottom div, which is our input-like item. It will make the popover to go up. Okay, so this is the functionality we want. We'll grab this CSS here and I'll paste it somewhere over here. Okay, looks good for now. Okay, our next step is to give the user the ability to use the up and down keys to loop through all the options. Okay, so when I click here and start typing, when I click at the down or up key, nothing happens right now. I want to add an event to the key down and key up and make sure that we are selecting different values. Okay, we'll go to our input here and I'll add an event called key down, and I can use a modifier to give it a parameter. So in this case I want to use the up arrow key, and let's call a method called up, and I'll do the same thing for key down dot down, and this is the down arrow key, and I'll call a method called down. Let's create those two methods in here, the up method and down. Now what I want to happen on those up and down functions is to say if the user clicked down and we have another item to go down, so the selected is not the last item in our matches array. In this case I want to bump the selected by 1. Otherwise, if we clicked on up, in this case I want to reduce from the selected 1. Okay, so let's try this. I'll do if this dot selected is equal 0. In this case I'll just return, because we don't want to change the selected, we're already at the top. Otherwise, let's do this dot selected is minus equals 1. Okay, I'll do the same logic for the down method. In this case, if this dot selected is greater or equal to this dot matches dot length minus 1, because the length is the total number and it's not starting from 0. And in this case I want to return, otherwise I need to do this dot selected plus equals 1. Okay, and I think it should work. Let's try it out. Let's type A and click down and up, and it works. Now you already see the issue here. When I scroll down with the keys, the list is not automatically scrolling down for me. Now the behavior I want to have is when I click on the down and up keys, I want this div right here, this unordered list, to scroll with me. Okay, so let's create a function. I'll call this one scroll to item. So scroll to item, and I'll make sure I call it from the up and down methods, because I need to use it in both of them. So the scroll to item is going to catch this element right here and make sure the scroll to top value is based on the selected number. and I need to make sure I have a reference to this options right here. So this option list, I want to have a reference called, let's say, options list. Okay, and now I can go to the scroll to item method and say this dot $refs dot option list dot scroll top, and this is going to be equal to this dot selected. Now this dot selected is going to be a number, so we're going to scroll top by 0 or 1 pixel or 2 pixels, which is not good enough. We need to tell it, let's say we are at the second item, so we need selected, which is 2 times the height of the element. So I need to find out what is the height of each list item. So we can check it right here, and we have about 39 pixels. Okay, so let's add to our data here another one called item height, and the height is going to be hard-coded, will be 39. Now I can say this dot selected times this dot item height. Okay, let's try this one out now, make sure I don't have any errors, and click A, and I can click down, and the list is scrolling with me. Let's see, when I go to the bottom, we don't have any weird glitches in here, and when I go all the way up, it's not going over the first item, and it's not going under the last item. Okay, I think we are almost there. We just need to have the ability to click enter and to have this item selected for us. Okay, so we need to add another event here, says at keydown dot enter, and what I want to do is to select the item. So select item, and based on this logic, it should just work for us. Okay, let's try it out. I'll start typing A and go down and click enter, and we get Johnny Cage. Awesome. Now there are two very important events that I want to add to this component so that the consumer of this component knows what happened. So I need one for change event. So every single time I type inside this input, I want him to have the ability to know what is the current value. So let's say he want to go to the API, to the database. He want to grab a filtered list of items and send them back to me so I can present them in the autocomplete component. And the second event is when I select an item, the consumer should know which item has been selected. Okay, so on the select, it's fairly easy. We can go to select item, which is the one in here, and say this dot $emit, and the event name is selected, and the value is going to be this dot selected item. Okay, we're going to have problem with this one, and you'll see it in a moment. I'll just save it. Okay, now let's go back to the app.vue, and I want to say that at selected, which is the event I just made, I'm going to call customer selected, and this is a method I'll make right here. So methods, and I'll have a method called customer selected, and this one is going to get the customer back, and all I want to do is console.log the customer. Okay, looking good. Let's try now, and David, and this is the problem I've mentioned earlier. We get the Vue.js observer that wraps each one of our items inside the component, and the consumer of this component doesn't want to have the observer value. So as the consumer, you will expect just a regular object, the same type you passed into this autocomplete function. A nice wrapper on this one to strip out the observer is to say JSON.stringify, and this value is stringify. Now it doesn't have an observer, and then I can parse it back again. So JSON.parse, and parse this entire value. So when I parse and stringify this selected item, in this case I get the regular object. Let's try it out right now in the browser. Refresh, and I'll choose Joshua Bark, enter, and I get the customer. Great. Now, other issue I have here is when I click on this item, I'm not automatically focused into my input. So I need to add another reference to my input text. I'll call this just input, and in my toggle visible method here, I can say this dot refs dot input dot focus. Okay, and I'm not sure this one is going to work because the popover is has a display none, and I'm not sure this one is going to kick in on time. Okay, let's try it out and click, and no, it's not focused. Let's try again, refresh the page. No, it's not focused. So let's try a nice hack for this one. I'll do set timeout, and on the set timeout I'll make this .ref.input not focus, and I'll make it happen after, let's say, 50 milliseconds. Save, refresh, and okay, now it's focused. Now we solve this problem. The next problem we have is I don't know what is the current value of this input outside my component. Oh, I can go into my input right here. No, you know what? I can use the computed value, because the computed value will get reevaluated every single time I'm changing the query. So here I can say this dot dollar emit, and I'll emit a change event, and the value will be this dot query. Okay, let's try it out to make sure that it works. I'll just indent those a little bit better and add another event for change on change. Okay, and on change will be another method here that will get value, and I can console.log the value here. Okay, let's try it out, and let's start typing, and I do get the value. Okay, I think we're almost done. There is just one more feature I want to add to this autocomplete component, which is the ability to reset the current value of the input once we have selected an item in the array. So let's say I have Mark Smith selected, and I click on it, and now Mark Smith is the current value. And when I click on this one again, I want to make sure that this input is empty or not, based on what the consumer chose to do with it. So let's create another prop inside our component called how about should reset. Okay, and once we have a selected item, which is right here, selected item, I'll say if this dot should reset, then I can do this dot query equals an empty string, and this dot selected is equal 0 again. Okay, and all right, let's go up here and change the should reset to be equal to true, and now type something and choose Mary Daniels and click again, and I've resetted the value. And if I'm going to set this one to false and save it and refresh and try Mary Mark, okay, and click again, we still have the value persisted and the selected item persisted. Okay, I think that the final step in this component is to make sure we know what are the values we get inside our props, and make sure we have default properties for the one that the user didn't pass into us. Okay, so we can go back to the autocomplete function. I'll grab the list of properties from here and I'll paste it in here so I don't forget them, and I'll create an object inside my props, and the key items, this is for this prop right here, is going to have a default value of an empty array, and the type is going to be an array. Next, we need one for filter by, and we don't have a default value, and the type should be a string. Next, we'll have one for the title, and we can say that the type is string, and then we can set the default value to be what we have in here. So select one, and now we can just use title. Okay, this is the default value. And finally, we have should reset. The type of this one is Boolean, and the value, not value, the default value is, let's say, true. Okay, now we can remove this one entirely, and I think it should work. Let's say, okay, we're missing a comma here. Save and refresh, and it works. And let's remove the should reset item. We're good here. Refresh and try Joshua Burke, and it all works. Let's add a title and look for a customer, save, and the title is reflected right here. Okay, this is it, guys. I hope you find this tutorial interesting. If you want to see other Vue.js components being made, or you want to see more tutorials like this one, please leave a comment down below. I'll have all the code to this project inside my GitHub repo. Thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.